It's time again to better know a commander deck. We've got 5 for you on the docket today, so make sure you smash that like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be alerted for weekly videos. Let's get into the decks. I have a confession to make. I am the Yuriko player people warned you about. Yuriko the Tiger Shadow is by far my favorite deck of all time. I've put it together, I've taken it apart, I've tried to power it up, I've tried to power it down. So it's safe to say I have the ins and outs for you. But what you want to do to build an effective Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. Before we get into the cards I would include, there is really one thing that matters the most, and that's the opening hand that you keep. Because Yuriko can get going as early as turn 2, ramp, extra card draw, all the other things other people will be doing in Commander, you're going to do a little bit later. So the key to a great opening hand for Yuriko is a 1-drop or 0-drop attacker, and a black land, and a blue land. That's it. But you have to mulligan aggressively, and make sure that's what your opening hand looks like. So, we're starting off strong with a card like Ornithopter. I think there's 4 0-drop creatures like this. You could play Phyrexian Walker if you wanted to. Ornithopter's great, it's 0 mana, it flies, it's not getting blocked. There's a bunch of great 1-drops like this too. Changeling Outcast is in fact a ninja, so that's kind of nice for later on, but it just matters that it can't be blocked. Here's another one of the 0-drops in Memnite. And we have the old Merfolk Warrior itself, Mistcloaked Herald, which can't be blocked. Your choice of ninjas is really up to you. I actually don't ever play too many ninjas in my deck now. I think Yuriko gives enough value to the deck by herself. But because we got Kamigawa Neon Dynasty last year, you can play things like Thousand Face Shadow with this awesome art. This is really where you get to put your personal touch on the deck. It won't matter which ninjas you pick, they'll all be good. Top of deck matters with Yuriko, so you're going to want to play a few cards that can allow you to set up the top of your deck. Something like Telling Time, or my favorite card ever, Ponder. And what you're trying to do is set up big flips for Yuriko and maximum damage to all of your opponents. So we're looking for big spells to flip, but also that don't cost a lot of mana to actually play. And I have a list of a bunch. First off, Delve spells. Temporal Trespass costs 11, or at least it does 11 damage, but you're taking an extra turn for 3 mana. Murderous Cut is probably the best removal spell in your deck. Costs 1 mana, but it flips for 5 damage. You also want Miracle spells. They typically cost a lot of mana as well, but if you do actually Miracle them, they're super cheap. And since we're manipulating the top of our deck, we can usually put Miracle cards back on top of our deck when we need them. I love Vanishment because you can use it on your own creature or own big permanent as well. Here's a new one. It's 7 mana, draw 3 cards, but really if you're attacking with enough creatures, this is going to be 2 or 3 mana, draw 3 cards, but it's also going to deal 7 damage to each of your opponents. Commandeer is absolutely free to cast. You're going to have tons of cards in hand, but it flips for 7 damage, so why not play it? All right, and finally, the other spells that do a lot of damage but cost not a ton to actually play are the split cards. When you reveal them, their mana value is the sum of both spells. So Commit to Memory is 10 damage. Yuriko's like one of the best decks of all time for a reason. Just know that your opponents will get real tired real quick of Yuriko chipping in for 1 and then dealing 11. That's what the deck does, and it's a great time. You can build it super competitive if you like. I typically only play Yuriko and like 2 or 3 other ninjas, and I actually play it as a Mind's Desire deck, so hope that helps. Can I help with 5-color spirits? Yeah. So right away, spirits in competitive formats has usually been blue-white or blue-white-green. When we take a look at the modern Innistrad sets, the spirits very much focus on blue and white. Competitive decks have traditionally splashed like Collected Company to get more than 1 spirit into play. And you're doing it on end steps and you're trying to play with a bit of tempo. That's a lot harder in Commander. The other thing is the 5-color options for spirits, as far as a Commander goes, are a little limited. So I'll tell you about one that I didn't pick, but the one I have behind me here is the one I'm going to pick. All right, so the one I didn't pick is Okagachi Vengeful Kami. It has a destroy things kind of clause, and you might want to include it in the deck. The name's fun to say. But like any type of deck that doesn't really have a lead commander for 5-color, your choice is Morophon the Boundless. Morophon is all creature types, and you get to choose spirits as it enters the battlefield. This reduces the color cost of your creatures and so it really doesn't require a ton of fixing. You just got to get it out super quick, and sometimes that's like turn 3 or 4. Hopefully that's where you were at. It's also an anthem to buff up your spirits, which a lot of them are quite small, so you're going to have to get after it, and this little bit of anthem helps a long way. So one of the key cards in the deck is definitely Rattle Chains. When you can start playing on your opponent's end steps instead of during your main phase, you get to wait and make decisions based on what you need, and this allows you to play all your spirits at flash speed. Next, you're going to want a Drogskol Captain in there. It gives all your creatures, or all your spirits, hexproof, and gives them a buff. If you can clone it, then it also will have hexproof, and all your creatures will be locked in with hexproof and a buff. Now, beyond blue and white, a lot of the other spirits that we're going to talk about come from the original Kamigawa. They had a spirit theme in all the colors, as well as an arcane theme. So you'll see spirit or arcane on a lot of these cards. And some of them I've never seen, and other ones I have. And we're going to talk about some I've excluded, but you could definitely give a try if you're looking for more of a battle cruiser feel. So Loam Dweller is really nice. It's a spirit that's going to give you ramp, which is crazy good. Play a spirit just means when you cast. So it doesn't have to resolve. You just have to cast a spirit. You get to put a land into play. That's some old templating from, almost 20 years ago. Another crazy ramp spell would be Petalmane Baku. Has amazing art. It's a walking rose bush. Rebecca Gay really nailed this art. You get key counters as well, which is kind of a fun thing. Definitely only from Kamigawa. Another way to cheat on mana is to play Kodama of the East tree. Now, Kodama obviously is from Kamigawa, but this card is from Commander Legends. And whenever you put a permanent into the battlefield, you get a lesser than or equal to converted mana cost into the battlefield as well. So it kind of doubles up mana, but also gives you double land drops. More protection for you, Kira, Great Glass Spinner. All of your creatures have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time each turn, counter that spell or ability. It's kind of like a little shield around them. But be careful, because if you target your own stuff when Kira's out there, the first time will be countered by you. Infernal Kirin is a mean way to go with the deck. Cast a spirit spell and start making your opponents discard cards. Modern Spirit would be Junji, the Midnight Sky, one of our dragon spirits from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. This one needs to die to make things happen, but you get to reanimate things when it dies, so that's kind of cool. You also get to play my boy Kairi, the Swirling Sky. Kairi returns creatures to their owner's hand, or you can mill and get instants and sorceries back. Get you a Zendikar Spirit in Skyclave Apparition. It'll remove all the pesky things, maybe a Blood Moon, maybe a Propaganda, all the stuff that's really annoying. Everyone loves an on-theme card draw spell. Well, here's Ribbons of the Reikai. Draw a card for each spirit you control. You're going to refill at the end of the game and finish everyone off. Similar spell here with Distant Melody. It just got reprinted in Commander Masters. Here's a big one for any typal deck, Kindred Discovery. Choose a creature type, then whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, doesn't even have to deal damage, draw a card. This should keep your hands full for a long, long time. You might want to add a Worldly Tutor, and you can kind of choose how expensive or budget you want your land base to be. So now, the spirits that I didn't include, but if you really want to, you could hunt these down. Any spirit that's called a Myojin, when you cast them, they enter with a divinity counter, and removing that divinity counter does some sort of ridiculous thing to the game state. These things cost 8, 9, 10 mana though, and it's just not where I like to build commander decks, unless there's one that I'm really thinking is a good fit. And again, you have to cast them, so you can't cheat them into play and use the divinity counter. So that's kind of why I leave them out. But 5-color spirits is definitely a weird place to be. If I was dropping down to 2 colors, I might go with like Geist of St. Traft, because you get an equipment sub-theme there too. You can just suit up Geist of St. Traft and get to the beat town early on and often. But I hope that helps. You know we're going to bring the spice with this one. One of the things I love about monocolor commander decks is restriction breeds creativity. Now, for sure, there are monocolor staples. You would probably expect to see Cabal Coffers and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth in this deck, and you definitely can do that. But you also get to lean into some things that maybe are limited by the fact that you're only playing the one color, and that's never a bad thing. So mono black vampires, we're going with Drana, the Last Blood Chief. Not only is this deck going to be heavy on the vampires, We also get to play a non-legendary reanimator theme. So lots of ways to cook, and here we go. First off, we get to play my favorite mono black creature of all time, Yahenni, Undying Partisan. He's so hard to get rid of. He's a free sack outlet. He does so many things this deck wants to be doing. Now here's the best card in the deck, Captivating Vampire. It buffs all your other vampires, and you can start gaining control of other people's creatures. It turns out vampires have had a lot of support throughout the years, and so there's awesome abilities attached to a bunch of them. This is just one. I love throwing in a new vampire. We have Markov Baron, another anthem for your team. And if you have to discard it, you can cast it for its madness cost and convoke. Classic mono black staple Blood Artist here. You're going to be sacrificing your own creatures, so you might as well drain the table while you do it. Mono black usually has a huge mana endgame, and Nirkana Revenant's a huge part of that. And guess what? It's a vampire. So easy include. I definitely love huge bursts of card draw in any kind of deck, and this is no exception. We have Champion of Dusk here. Playing this late game might draw you 7, 8, 9, 10 cards for 5 mana. And if you reanimate it with Drana, then you're going to get to do that all for free. Dark Confidant is classically one of the best cards that was ever made. Twilight Prophet is Dark Confidant on steroids. You don't lose a life, your opponents lose the life. Oh, and it's a vampire. We just got it as a reprint in Commander Masters as well, so it's at a really reasonable price right now. We've got an early game Menace Lifelinker, and late game with Kicker, it's also a reanimation card. How about another vampire that is a reanimation card? We have to put some cards in your graveyard as well, so we're playing Entomb, and we can bring them back with Persist and Mono Black Staple Reanimate. You know this one's a staple because it was in Commander Collection Black. We need some graveyard hate for your opponents, and Mono Black has that covered with a vampire. Kalitas, Trader of Get, is going to exile your opponent's creatures as they die, and you get some zombies to buff up your team too. Sanctum Seeker is kind of an anthem for your team as well. Whenever they attack, each opponent loses a life, and you gain 1 life. Here's another payoff for any little bit of aristocrat things you do, Colostria Highborn. You're going to have tons of black mana lying around, so as you murk your own creatures, just pay in a black and draining the table. One of our classic free sack outlets, Viserys here. It's a vampire. We also get to play Henrika Domnathi. This vampire has a bunch of things that can happen, including transforming into a creature that buffs your team. And you can go ahead and treat yourself with Black Market Connections. This card's good in any deck, but in mono black, you're definitely going to want something that gives you tons of advantage. It makes shapeshifters as well, so those are vampires. How about a 3-mana blowout with Vona's Hunger? We're headed back to Ixalan, so we might as well play some Ixalan-related cards. How about a Typal board wipe in Olivia's Wrath? And of course, we get to play Haunting Voyage, which allows you to return all of your vampires from the graveyard to the battlefield, just to do all the shenanigans over again. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Jet Medallion, obviously a great ramp piece in mono black. And you get to play Bontu's Monument, which decreases the cost of your black creature spells, and it's going to drain the table as it does it. So there you go, mono black vampires, lots of pizzas, lots of choices. Hope that helps. Once you see this, you're not going to want to let it go. We're talking the Ice Queen herself, Hylda of the Icy Crown. She's a blue-white army knife in a can. Or a crown? Early game, you're going to use her to scry and draw through your deck. Mid game, you're going to build out some elementals. And late game, you're going to buff them and go in for the win. So what is that going to look like? Let's see. First of all, it's an absolute must to go dig for Hylda's Crown of Winter. If you're not on theme, why are you playing the deck, right? The fact that you get to tap things for free on your turn is just awesome. So how do we do that? We got some things that search up the crown. You get to play Whir of Invention. You're going to have treasures and mana rocks and things like that. So this should be no issue. You get to play Tezzeret the Seeker, which when it comes into play, you immediately -3 it and go get and put onto the battlefield the Icy Crown. And then we're going to abuse the ability to tap and untap it. So we've got Voltaic Key and Manifold Key. And since these are 1-drop artifacts, we have the best 1-drop artifact tutor there is out there, Urza's Saga. And one last tutor piece that you're definitely only going to use to go find the crown, Enlightened Tutor. With the Dominaria Remastered reprints at the beginning of the year, these things are way cheaper than they ever have been. All right, we need ways to tap creatures on our opponent's side. So we need things like this, Icy Manipulator. And you might as well flex and get yourself a beta copy. Being called a mono artifact, secretly what that means is you have to tap it to use it. But they didn't know that in 1993. They just said it's a mono artifact. All right, you get to play Freed from the Real, one of my favorite auras of all time. Normally you stick it on one of your own things to make infinite mana, but instead you're going to drop it onto one of their annoying creatures and tap it to your heart's content, or untap it and then tap it again, your choice. Like any deck, you're playing lands, so Retreat to Coral Helm's really nice. You can use it to scry, or you can tap target creature, which means an opponent's creature. The best removal in the game is the stuff that keeps commanders on the board, but turns them into meaningless pieces. So you might as well play Imprison in the Moon. It won't trigger Hylda, but you will get to put a sweet card on a commander that then gets to stay in play and do nothing for the rest of the game. You also get to play Verity Circle. Whenever an opponent uses their creatures, you're going to get to draw cards, and late game when you have tons of mana, you can just tap some creatures and draw some cards and build some elementals. Now, Cryptic Command is definitely not a commander card, but it might be in this deck. You can tap someone's team as they're about to go to combat, and that could put a lot of triggers on the stack for you to pay for and then get rewarded. Here's a draft common that turns into a really powerful card in Hylda's deck. Plunge into Winter will get you a scry and a draw and maybe a 4/4. The Signpost uncommon from Wilds of Eldraine is Charade of Numbing Depths. Again, plays with the stun counter and tapping things idea. Okay, I got two more cards for you. The first one's Citadel Siege. You're going to play it and choose dragons, and so at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, you're going to tap a creature, and that means you're going to have a trigger to pay for and draw a card, or make an elemental, or buff your whole team. And last but not least, borrowing 100,000 arrows. I love a good burst draw of cards, and this only costs 3 mana. So as you've been tapping down things, you're going to have an ability some point in the game to absolutely refill your hand and take advantage of the fact that you're in control of the game, which is what a blue-white deck should do. Hope that helps. Is this the best 5-color commander? Let's find out. Now, I'm not going to lie, this probably isn't my kind of thing, but let's talk about it anyways. I would argue the best part about this card is the flavor text. It relishes old-fashioned family meals. Cannibalism and magic, who would have known? Now, Atogatog is part of the AOG collection, and there's like 10 of them. So that means building around any one type of AOG is not going to be your best bet, I don't think. But you could totally lean into a sacrifice theme. I think you'd have a way worse deck, but a much more fun deck if you picked a theme of funny named cards. But we're going with a real deck here, so let's take a look. First of all, never forget that these are funny looking critters. The original AOG here, sack an artifact, it gets buffed. And the sneaky Oratog, sack an enchantment, and it gets buffed. Psychotog has my favorite AOG art. Discard a card, it gets buffed, or remove cards from your graveyard and it gets buffed. And then there's Sarkatog, and it's about graveyards and artifacts as well. That is to say, we're going to try and buff up one of our AOGs and beat down face real hard. Now, if you want to knock people out with commander damage, that means you're going to need a lot of AOGs. We need to get creative because there's only like 10 AOGs, so secretly this is a shapeshifter deck. We have Bloodline Pretender, which gets bigger on its own. We've got Metallic Mimic, which is going to buff your whole team with +1 counters. Realm Walker's here to draw you cards. Unsettled Mariner protects the team, which is really nice. Adaptive Automaton is also going to buff the team. Now here's the game plan. We're going to get a bunch of AOGs out, we're going to attack with Atogatog, and we're going to sack all those creatures to get a one-hit kill with commander damage. Then after combat, we're going to cast Fling and throw this guy at another one of our opponents so that they are in a critical position as well. Hopefully, just before you start all that fun, you're going to cast Cosmic Intervention. This is going to get back all your creatures that just went into the cement mixer before the carnage happened. If you want to play other creatures in the deck, which you totally can, you need a Maskwood Nexus because you need all your creatures to be AOGs. This also allows you to make AOGs at will. If you don't have a Fling, the next big thing to do is sacrifice your giant AOG and draw a bunch of cards. That'll keep the game going for you. Greater Good is awesome at that. Kindred Discovery just keeps the cards flowing, so definite include here. Because you're sacrificing creatures, you're going to want to play them from your graveyard, and Conduit of Worlds gives you Crucible of Worlds, plus you can cast additional cards. And of course, when you cast an Atog, you definitely want to make another Atog, so Reflections of Litjara goes right into this deck. Again, wild build path here, but I think this is where you're going to have the most fun, and it's never not funny to throw a 30 power creature at someone and close out the game. Hope that helps.